Hello, everyone, and welcome to a slightly delayed 107 podcast. Unfortunately, we had some time penalties we had to serve, just like every other bloody driver on the grid. But welcome. Today, we are going to be discussing the Austrian Grand Prix, which just happened this weekend. And I thought it was a pretty good race. How about you, Ash?
I enjoyed the sprint race. The mixed
Okay,
conditions really mixed it up.
true.
The race itself, I thought, was a little bit dull at times. The Lando Hamilton battle, honestly, the best thing that came out, I say the best, one thing that came out of the sprints was the penalties. I think that's what
Mm.
everyone's talking about. And we'll talk about it now. But I mean, honestly, I think what really stood out as well was Max was like, I want to go for the fastest lap on the last lap,
Yeah, it's
right?
just unreal.
I'm sure he knew Sergio had it as well.
Oh,
And the
yeah,
fact that he was warming up his tires
like it
at
was
the end of
quality,
the
yeah.
just shows how far ahead him and Red Bull are. And I was just like, there's nothing you can say.
The guy
There's
is an
nothing you can say.
absolute machine.
Yeah.
Like he's a machine, and he has an ungodly machine beneath him. It's a
And
complete joke.
fair play to Red Bull and the team to let him do it. But like so much confidence they have in Max not binning it, the pit stop crew giving him a good stop, because they could have just like front left fails to go on. Charles
True.
Leclerc goes ahead and he wins the race.
I
So
mean, to be
fair play to them.
fair, he's so far ahead in the championship that if Max was his own constructor, he would still be winning the constructors. So I
Mad.
mean, you can't really deny it. If it makes him happy, and yes, there's a bit of risk, that you might as well crack on with it. But why don't we go through the weekend? Like I said, I thought it was a decent enough weekend, but why don't we go through the weekend and start off with Friday quali for the Sunday race. And
The
then
sprint
we'll move on
shootouts.
to the sprint shootout on Saturday, and we'll maybe talk a little bit about the format, etc., etc. Because this is the second time we've had a sprint Saturday. But yeah, so Friday quali,
Yep.
Sergio absolutely fumbled the bag. I think that's very apparent and very obvious. And Nico Hulkenberg has made it to Q3 more times than Sergio Perez has done. And
Yeah.
Nico's in a Haas. Nothing against Haas, obviously. I bloody love them. But the problem is that I just think that the expectations of Sergio are at the very least get to Q3 and get a decent amount of points every single weekend. And it's just been a bit all over the place, really, to be completely honest.
Yeah, because it was the theme of the weekend was the track limits. He had
Yeah.
his lap deleted, which put him out. And well, obviously we'll talk about that as it was the theme of the weekend. But
Mm.
I don't think Sergio is at risk of losing his seat.
No.
But Nico Hulkenberg is really showing to essentially top teams that he's a solid driver.
Still. Yeah.
And I could see him moving to a bigger team in the future.
Yeah, you never know. I think it's certainly on the cards. I mean, he was a reserve driver at Aston Martin as well, so he has those links there too. But I think that for me, I think that when you look at what happened last year when Kevin came in, and Kevin did an absolutely insane job at the beginning of last season, obviously coming in for Nikita, and then like people thinking that he's really good. And don't get me wrong, I think that Kevin is absolutely brilliant, but then Nico's coming in and proving that he's arguably so far this season even better. So I think that's something to take into account as well, like that he could potentially, push those top teams to rethink their drivers. I think the only thing that goes against Nico is that I don't think he's that marketable. So there's a slight issue, I guess, for teams that maybe, want to have a certain image or, want to attract better sponsors, etc., etc. Again, nothing against Nico whatsoever. Absolute lad. But I'm just saying that I think there are more attractive drivers out there within the top teams.
If you're talking about marketing, if you put Nico in a car and he gets podiums and wins, he's going to bring
True. Yeah,
sponsors,
very true.
people in. I think what's a little bit also unfair to Nico and Kevin to an extent is qualifying. The Haas just seems to switch on its tires
Yeah.
and does really well. Well, in the hands of Nico, doing really well. obviously in the race, that's a big negative, and they just fall back down and fall back down. And
Yeah,
maybe they're not really showing their racecraft as well as they can due to the car just easing up its tires.
it's very interesting because both the Haas and the Ferrari, both Ferrari powered engines in the cars, and obviously I know that Haas buy a lot of their components from Ferrari as well, but both of those cars eat through their tires really, really quickly. So I'm not saying that it's linked necessarily to the PU, but maybe there's something in there. Maybe the way that it delivers torque through corner exits or engine braking maybe wears on the tires too much, or I don't know. It could be aero. I am not entirely sure, but it's just something that I've noticed. Yeah, it's a similarity, and you can't deny that, really.
No, so I think, and it'll be interesting to see because if Haas do get on top of those tire issues, like they could become a solid midfield team.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
But anyway, going back to Friday quali, Ferrari showed a decent amount of pace as well, didn't they?
they did 2 and 3. Charles Leclerc put in an amazing lap.
Yeah.
Would you say he's the best qualifier on the grid,
Mm,
considering what he's doing in that car?
probably. But then again, at the same time, he does crash half the time. I think
Well, he's just so on the edge, isn't
Yeah.
he? Like when he pulls it off, he pulls it off.
That's
right?
the
And
issue.
You look at Baku,
Yeah.
but he's so on the edge
Look
that
at Baku, look at Miami.
yeah,
Like, he either puts it, like, so close to being on pole, or probably would put it on pole if he was on it, in a slightly better car. But then the issue is that half the time he bins it. So it's pretty difficult to say that yes, he is the best qualifier, because I don't know. I mean, arguably Max is the best qualifier. Nico is very good at qualifying. Lando is very good in qualifying. So is George, and so is Lewis. So I wouldn't say yes 100% the best qualifier purely because he bins it maybe 30 to 40% of the time. So, which is a real shame. But I'm very glad that he didn't bin the Ferrari this week. They had a couple of new upgrades, which is awesome, and seemingly they're working pretty well. So I think next weekend should be good as well. But those upgrades, I guess, brought them that little bit closer to Red Bull, but obviously not close enough because Max Verstappen is an absolute animal. Lando P4 was also a pretty good result for McLaren. Obviously, they brought new upgrades to Austria, which I was very happy about, and they seem to work pretty well. And they've got more upgrades coming next weekend as well. And also Oscar will have all of those upgrades, I believe. There might be one or two differences. But I believe that Oscar Piastri will also have most of, if not all of those upgrades too. So we could see the McLarens pushing up a little bit next weekend, or this weekend, I guess, because it is race week for the British Grand Prix. But was there anything else you wanted to mention around Friday quali or build on the McLaren or Ferrari bits?
So with McLaren, the upgrade package is 75% here. Not 75, 50% here.
It was
25% Silverstone and 25% in Hungary.
Yes. Yeah, so it
the
could...
full potential of that car should be shown in Hungary if the upgrades are doing their job, which in Austria, on Lando's car, I think it'll be interesting to see how much of it was upgrades and how much of it was Lando at the track, because we know he does quite well at Austria.
Ironically, you said 50% upgrades. I think it was 50 upgrades, 50% Lando. Lando is absolutely unreal in Austria. And I think it will be very interesting to see how well the McLaren does in Silverstone. With the 75% upgrades for what they want, but also purely because, and again, we're bleeding into next week's or next podcast. But I think that because Silverstone is quite similar to Barcelona in terms of track conditions and bits and pieces, that I actually think that the Mercedes and the Aston Martin cars will be higher up the grid, and I think that will push the McLarens further down back to sort of where you'd expect them to be right now.
The Aston Martins will be higher up, because they didn't really have the best Spain race, did they?
I think they'll be higher up for sure, higher up than they. Like, I guess Lance was end of the race without penalties. God, we keep bringing up the penalties. Anyway, that's enough for the quali.
Wait, one thing I want to point out in the quali.
Oh God, yeah.
No, just some respect to Alex Albon, for getting it into Q3.
Oh, yeah, but the problem is that if we bring up Alex Albon, we'd have to record for hours.
You will record for hours. Do you know he's going to be in London on Wednesday, I think, doing like a fan event?
Yeah, there's like
so
a
I was
fan
walking
thing,
through Piccadilly Circus and it was rammed already. So I don't know if Williams, because they've got a pop up there with old cars and stuff. So I don't know if they've already started doing some stuff, but the amount of people going in and out and that was like on a Monday afternoon.
Yeah, so I think it's also partly because Williams are celebrating their 900th Grand Prix. Is it 900? No, it's like is it 900th?
No
GP
idea.
weekend or 700th or something like that. It's like a special Grand Prix. Williams F1. Well, I'll find out anyway. But yeah, so Williams have got a little bloody Windows virus shit. But yes, 800 Grand Prix. But technically, because we had the Imola race cancelled, it's actually only their 799th Grand Prix, and their 800th will be in Hungary. But I think they're just sort of going, well, we'll celebrate it anyway. It's a home race.
British team.
British Grand Prix. I think they're gonna slyly sweep it under the rug. But I love it. I love it.
Counting, right?
But we could potentially even see something special on the Williams, like a special sticker or whatever it is. So yeah, which is really cool. But yes, they did pretty well in Austria, which is pretty well. Alex Albon did pretty well in Austria. Not so much for our favourite American. Oh, we're actually recording this on the 4th of July, so happy Freedom Day to my main man Logan Sargent.
Let's jump into the sprint race.
Sprint Saturday.
Sprint Saturday. Standard top two.
Yeah, standard top.
Well, no, we can't say standard top two because Sergio isn't there. Standard pole position, but Sergio's up there. Kind of shows what he could have done in proper qualifying.
Yeah,
and Lando on the
Lando P3
third spot. So well done to him.
Yeah, I think
Nico in P4.
Yeah, Nico making P4 is absolutely brilliant as well. I guess technically into Q3 again for Nico, although not proper Q3 because obviously it's a sprint quali, so it's slightly different. But again, he did pretty well as well. But one thing that did surprise me was the poor Mercedes performance. You had, Lewis didn't even make Q2 technically, or the second round, which is mad. So, but I will defend Mercedes right now. And I think that is because the car was set up for the Sunday race. So they weren't set up for wet racing. And so their car, because of Parc Ferme, wasn't optimized essentially for the wet weather. So I think you have to give them a little bit of leeway for that. However, all of the other cars were also set up for dry running.
I think the upgrades either didn't work, the track didn't suit them, something like that. And obviously Toto said it throughout the race. We know the car's bad. Right?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens at Silverstone because it's a different track. They did well at Spain, just to see is it just a track thing or have they stalled with their updates? But and then the results were again Red Bull 1 and 2, Carlos getting up there. Did you see the little plaque that they gave them?
I really liked that. I thought that was really cool.
No, I thought that was very cheap.
What?
Right? Yes.
No, I kind of liked it. I mean, it's better than the medals.
I'd rather the medals, but was it? Yeah, I'd rather a medal.
I think the plaque's quite nice.
The plaque is something you can get off F1 Authentics with a bit of bodywork in.
I mean, but
it honestly looks like something you just like corporate work event awards. I mean, this is Formula One. Give them something a bit more.
I guess
Formula One-ish.
I don't know. Then again, you say that, but the person who puts it on pole gets a bloody tiny wheel. So I mean, you're talking about glamour, and you're just being given a wheel for putting it on pole. So although it is a lot better than the rubbish hat that Charles Leclerc was given in Baku. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
He just got given like this Pirelli hat with a load of paint splatters on it. He was just like, "Oh, great, cheers!"
Was
Like,
that for
that was
putting it
it.
on pole?
Yeah, for putting it on pole in Baku for the sprint race. It was
Why
just
don't
like,
they just keep the wheel which they signed? That's pretty cool.
yeah,
like that.
I think they should just keep the wheel. I think most of them do. I think Lance Stroll kept his from his
Well,
pole in Turkey a couple of years ago. I believe
what?
the tyre is the drivers to keep, but I think you're thinking of obviously when Lewis was putting it on pole and he was just like, I don't need any more of these wheels. I've already got 900 of them, so you can have it.
Well, no,
type
yeah.
thing.
Didn't he say like, so what happens with it? And the guy's like, we give it to you. He's like, do you? I don't
Yeah,
have any.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Unless it's the thing with the team where the team keeps everything, right? And they give him a replica.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, if you win a Grand Prix, let's say you finish first and you have a trophy, that technically belongs to the team 9 times out of 10. However, you can have it written into your contract that either you keep it or you get given a replica, and teams can buy replicas, or you yourself, the driver, can buy the replicas as well. But that's also why now drivers are given medals, because the medals is 100% theirs. It does not belong to the team. But some of these replicas can cost like 50,000 euros. Like it's a lot of money. But then again, when you've won a Formula One race, I reckon you've probably got 50,000
and if you're on
euros
like
knocking
40,
around.
50 million a year,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because didn't Lewis have into his contract? I don't know if there were other ones, but he wanted the British GP one, and to make sure that he got the one that he lifted on the podium, he scratched it just to make sure it's like this is the authentic real
Did not
one.
know that.
And was not swapped to the replica. Yeah, so I don't know if it was the first race he won or whatever, but yeah, the trophy he was given, he scratched it just to make sure it's like, but they're not going to swap it with a replica.
Nice. He probably scratched it with one of the 800 earrings he has. Anyway, so sprint race itself. Let's talk about Red Bull.
Okay.
First couple of corners were insane.
Yeah.
Like being pushed onto the grass and like
the lack of traction.
Lack of traction. Like it was absolutely mad. I am very surprised that they didn't come together. Like I'm actually quite surprised, because I feel like because it was Max that got pushed onto the grass. I feel like if Max didn't have utterly unreal wet weather driving abilities, and if it was the other way around, so you'd had Max push Sergio onto the grass, Sergio would have span out. I'm pretty sure of it. Like,
so?
I think it was absolutely ridiculous. Like that grass was very wet. And obviously you get zero traction on grass pretty much in those Formula One cars in those conditions. So I think it's quite lucky that they didn't come together. But then also Max didn't give Sergio any room on the corner into turn 3, which caused Lando to go into anti-stall and drop back about 5 places. So
yeah,
I was
I think
pissed.
that Sergio knew Max was there and he wanted to be like, get his elbows out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's his
but then
only
he obviously,
chance. Because if he lets Max
yeah,
go, he'll
and
never
didn't want
see him
to,
again.
He didn't want to cause and then he's like, oh shit, he's on the grass.
Yeah,
Okay, let's give him some space. And because he did that, I'm 100% sure Max is like, I'm sending it into turn 3. Whatever happens, right?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah.
But apparently Sergio didn't know that Max was there.
He knew he was there.
Apparently. I'm only saying apparently. More than likely.
They talked it out after the race. He knows he was there. He knows he's there.
Max will have seen through that. But I feel like the not giving him any room into turn 3, like Max not giving Checo any room into turn 3, is just straight out of the Max Verstappen playbook. Like there's no like, oh, it was an accident. No, Max knew exactly what he was doing.
No, he was doing it because Sergio pushed him off.
But I feel like Max would have done it anyway. Even if Sergio hadn't pushed him off, I reckon Max would have just gone, it's my corner, I'm going through.
Nah, I think Max would like, I'll get him in time.
But either way, I think each driver I think it was 50-50 the battle. So I don't think that like, Max should be penalised for dangerous driving or whatever and blah, 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 or Sergio should be penalised or anything like that. It was also wet weather racing, so I think that there's always a bit of leeway given for sure. But it was certainly a very interesting first few corners. And not really that much contact for the first few corners either, so which was pretty lucky, especially in the wet.
Yuki had some contact.
Yes, so obviously Yuki had a bit of contact and then went right off into the gravel into turn 4, I believe it is. 4? I think it's called turn 4. But after essentially the first proper, where it would have been DRS zone in Austria. And then obviously he had to have some damage fixed. But I think it was a reasonably clean sprint race. And there was changing conditions. So some drivers gambled and went on to tries with George Russell pitting on to tries first. Yeah, he was definitely the winner out of that gamble. One thing I would like to mention is Valtteri Bottas trying to go on mediums at the beginning of the race is ballsy. But from 19th position, you've got nothing to lose, so you might as well give it a go, in complete honesty. Because all Valtteri would need to do is just pit at the end of the like warm-up formation lap, if he didn't feel like, you know, the tyres were good enough, and then just switch to inters and that's it. Like, you don't really lose anything. So I think it was a very good idea to gamble from Alfa Romeo / Valtteri Bottas, whoever's decision that really was.
It's a sprint shootout.
Yeah.
You know, there's not that many points involved. You might as well see what you can do.
Exactly.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you don't lose anything.
Absolutely. But yeah, the changing conditions meant that George managed to go from out of the points to into the points. A couple of people dropped out of the points as well. But Oscar Piastri also capitalized pretty well from the changing conditions as well, which is good. But it was interesting racing for sure.
Yeah. I wish Sunday just had the changing conditions.
Yeah, Sunday and changing conditions would have been fun for sure.
Yeah.
But like I said, I still think that Sunday's race was entertaining. I've got no issues with Sunday whatsoever. I thought it was a good race.
So, what are your thoughts on Sunday?
So Verstappen disappeared into the wind as per usual. It is what it is. The one thing that I didn't like, by the way, is that Max pitted, which let Leclerc go into P1 temporarily, which means that Max lost his streak of 249 laps led, which I think was like third or fourth most amount of laps led consistently. And it meant that Max didn't have a Grand Slam. So that, I was like, Max, what you playing at type thing. But it's such a ridiculous thing that, you know, just purely because he pitted slightly early, he didn't get a Grand Slam, which he's had like 3 of this season or something ridiculous. But he disappeared into the wind. And then the battle behind Verstappen for the other 2 podium spots was pretty good. I think that Sainz was very clearly the faster car, but Ferrari not switching Sainz and Charles, I think was the wrong decision personally. And Ferrari's communication on the team radio, you could hear that they just have no idea what on earth is going on. And then strategist Carlos came out and just essentially just did everything himself, which is a complete joke. It's very, very frustrating that Ferrari seemingly think that they can win races on heritage alone. They need to improve their teamwork if they're going to go back to the top of the grid.
Yeah, I mean, I think the DRS may have helped Carlos a little bit, just to keep up with Charles. And I think it's right they didn't swap him. There was no way that Charles was going to go after Max. Carlos was going to go after Max. And I was like, look, if you got the DRS, overtake him on track.
True, but I think Carlos was told to stay behind. It was team orders, and I think that if that wasn't the case, I think Carlos would have overtaken Charles and gotten away with it. And like literally, like Charles, I don't think would have gotten P2.
You reckon? Nah.
Yeah, that's like at that time anyway. We all know that Sergio ended up P2 after penalties and blah blah blah. But we'll get on to that.
P3.
No, after penalties.
No. Charles got P2.
I could have sworn
Carlos.
Yes. Sorry. I got confused. Carlos, it was sorry, because
Carlos was. So Sergio got P3.
Yeah.
Which he took off Carlos in the race.
Yeah.
But Carlos got knocked down because of penalties.
Yeah, that was it.
And then Lando went up.
Yeah, and then Lando went up
from 5 to 4.
Yeah, which is just the penalties were ridiculous, and you know for a fact that the FIA have messed up because they had to post an article explaining why the race results changed 4 hours after the race. That's when you know that you've messed up.
Also, would they have done it if Aston Martin didn't?
I don't think they would have done it had Aston Martin not said anything. I genuinely don't think they would have done. But we'll come back onto penalties in a minute because we still have some during the race bits and pieces to run through as well.
We might as well just name this a Lando Norris podcast.
No, I don't know. I don't. The next point I have is about Nico, so piss off. So I wanted to say that it was, speaking of penalties and lap times being deleted, Nico Hulkenberg got a track limits warning for retiring the car.
What?
Yeah, did you not know that? So Nico Hulkenberg,
how can you get a track limit warning?
Exactly. Technically, all four wheels of the car were off the track. However, he got a track limit warning for retiring his car.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying that the FIA have very clearly not done a particularly good job this weekend in terms of rules and scrutineering and all that fun stuff. They just haven't. It's been a complete shit show, essentially.
It must be this. Well, it might be the automated system, which it just naturally detects four wheels outside of the.
If the automated system worked correctly, then why on earth did we have to wait 4 hours for all these penalties to come in? So I would argue that
so many.
Messed up.
It was just like a long scroll.
Apparently, there were 1,200 potential track limit violations. So I do understand that it's like
all of the servers and machines.
Yeah, apparently, they had too much data to deal with. But at the same time, we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, so Nico genuinely got a track limits warning for retiring his car. Which is absolutely insane. But Nico was doing reasonably well up until he had to retire his car, which is a bit of a shame. And then speaking of the Haas team as well, K-Mag's battle with Nick de Vries was pretty interesting. And I think K-Mag sort of had a decent enough battle with the other AlphaTauri as well. So it was nice to see some good battles happening behind. And I know that we complain.
Loads of great battles. There was Carlos and Sergio, which was really good.
Yeah.
And Carlos was out of DRS, in of DRS, out of DRS. So well done to him to keep it as far back as possible. Lewis and Lando was really good.
Yeah.
Obviously, really ahead of the team radio. It's like he's going off, penalties. So yeah, literally bar backs. Racing is actually really good.
Yeah, the racing's pretty good. Behind P1.
Yeah.
Which is just absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty good race. I think that the battles were good. And I think Austria lends itself to having really, really good battles purely because of where the DRS zones are and like the setups that you have to go into these DRS zones as well. There are multiple places on track where there are multiple overtaking opportunities. It's not just DRS and then we'll get round and that's it. There are actually corners that you have to, like heavy braking corners that you have to, think tactically about the positioning of your car and stuff like that. And it's a really awesome track and it was really, really nice to watch this race.
Yeah, no, like we said last week, Austria always brings good racing. So multiple DRS zones, multiple points to overtake and just different lines to take as well. So yeah, good battles throughout, but
it was also quite interesting watching Lando take the traditional wet lines during the sprint race as well. Like everyone was typically taking the normal racing line, or most drivers ahead of Lando were taking the typical racing line, and then you saw Lando not going anywhere near the apex and just sticking to a like traditional wet line. That was quite interesting to see the comparison between the two. Just a note, that was all.
Some drivers have certain lines through corners that suit them, suit the car.
Yeah, exactly.
If it suits their style. So I know Felipe Massa had a few lines in Turkey, which he did quite well at. So again, with Lando at Austria, he probably just knows like this works for me and how I drive.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it also plays into the car as well. And Lando had a very good weekend, obviously finishing P5 and then P4. After all of the penalties, which we will run through in a minute. But firstly, let's talk about that Max pit on the last lap.
Like, what more can we add since the start of the podcast? Yeah. Like, literally, it's like I want to go fast lap. Team like, we're in a good position here. It's like, now I'm coming in, but he put in the lap. the team put in the pit stop. One mistake and he's lost that race, and just Max just showing like how his dominance. And like I said, it was an absolute joke just watching him on the straight weaving, weaving just to warm up the tires. And yeah, but I guess you know what? I think most drivers would do the same in Max's position. If you have a chance of fast slap, we're gonna go for it. So yeah, I just think he's literally it's literally Formula Max and Formula One.
Pretty much,
that's
yeah.
what it is.
Again, that's exactly why obviously I joke about like Formula 1.5 because it's you just remove those top teams.
Actually, one thing I want to talk about is the Aston Martins didn't really have the best race.
Yeah, like I said, I think that the track just doesn't suit their car.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty much it. I
expect them to do better in Silverstone, but they were just kind of tootling around 5th, 6th, 7th. Yeah, and I know Fernando tried to make a little bit of a push.
Excuse me.
When Lando and Lewis were, bless you, child.
Thank you.
When Lando and Lewis were having their little battle, but they weren't really able to make an impact on the podium positions. So, Mercedes.
They were stuck behind the McLaren for quite a while as well.
Yeah, and the Mercedes again. Like, I mean, Toto's comments summed it up, right? It looked like they'd taken a step, but in Austria, it just feels like they've gone backwards. So again,
like
it could be the track. We'll see what happens at Silverstone.
I think it's partly the track, partly the fact that, especially during the sprint race, they weren't set up for wet weather racing. But Silverstone should be interesting. I can definitely see a Mercedes on the podium.
You think so?
Yeah, I can see that happening.
I don't think so.
I think it could happen.
We'll do our predictions in a bit. But anything else you want to talk about the race before we move on to...
No, let's jump straight into penalties. I think we should jump straight in.
Okay.
Because it's a complete... It shouldn't happen. I think... Do you remember when... I think it was Alonso. He had his podium taken away from him, or it was earlier on in the season. Somebody had their podium taken away from them. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was an hour afterwards. George had a podium
in Saudi Arabia,
and then it got taken away from him. And it just
wasn't it? Alonso was on the podium, and then they looked at it and they said, actually, in that penalty, you worked on the car by putting the rear jack on.
Yeah,
and then they took it away, gave it to George.
That was it. Yeah.
And then Aston Martin protested it, and then didn't like Mercedes go and deliver it to Aston Martin. And so Alonso got his podium taken, and George got his podium taken, and Alonso got it back. But yes, I think the point you're trying to make is the timing post race.
I think
delivering penalties because it does have an impact on the race. If you know someone ahead of you has got a penalty, or you've got a penalty, you either want to close that gap, build that gap.
Well, we're at Austria, right? We all know the infamous Lando's first podium was because Lewis Hamilton had a 5-second penalty and Lando had arguably the lap of his career. The best lap of his career, essentially, so far, where he managed to get within 5 seconds of Hamilton and was on the podium, right? If you know in your head the driver ahead of me has a 10-second time penalty or a 5-second time penalty and they haven't served it, or maybe it's earlier on in the race and you know that you have to make it to a certain point so that you can overtake them while they're in the pit because they're going to be there longer or whatever it is, it changes the race so much rather than just after the race everyone getting a stupid amount of penalties. It takes away some of the fun because you never know. Maybe, like Ocon, Max was given a 30-second time penalty and now no longer wins the race. You just don't know. It's such a weird thing. Maybe they even got so many penalties that Max went from, I don't know, P1 to P5 and doesn't even get anything. So, and it's just really stupid that these penalties come so far after the race. I understand the right of review and trying to say, actually, FIA, you didn't look at this. Please look into this because we feel as though this person didn't serve their penalty correctly, or actually Ocon broke track limits even more, so he shouldn't get 30 seconds of time penalty. It should be 40 or whatever it is, But I it's just not right, and it seems to be happening more and more often. And I feel like it's for this race weekend, Austria, right? you had a worrying amount of track limits violations, right? And I genuinely think that that is 75% the driver's fault. There are white lines, stay within them. If there was a wall off of the edge of that white line, you would not be breaking track limits because you would crash every single time. So I think the majority of the blame actually lies within the drivers. You're telling me that Esteban Ocon broke that rule so many times for track limits that he had a 30-second time penalty added on post-race. Do you know how many times that would have meant that you broke those track limits? That's like every other lap. Like, there are white lines there for a reason. Use them. It's not that difficult as far as I'm concerned. Again, I'm not a professional Formula One driver. I can't really talk too much, but at the same time, like, come on, you can't break them that often. I think the only one that really you could argue that sort of justified, like, you know, he tried his best was probably Yuki, and he had a 5-second time penalty. Like, he tried his best to stay in, unlike fucking Esteban or Nick De Vries, who had a 10-second time penalty and a 5-second time penalty. To me, it's just, 75% drivers, you know where the white lines are, stay within them, it's your own fault. However, the detection for going over the white line very clearly isn't right, or the FIA weren't prepared for having all of those violations happen.
So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I do apologise. I
You
just
went
sort
on
of
a little rant there.
But you can't really, like, again,
not
I'm obviously
finished.
I'm going to be very sorry. I'm going to be very opinionated, but at the same time, I'm not entirely wrong. Something needs to change there because it's just not right.
So I think the first thing the FIA need to do, and I think this is more for fans, I'm guessing the teams should know this, but if they don't, it's a bit worrying, is they need to come out and explain how they detect track limits and how they give these penalties. Like, how long is it, right? Because it's like 3 strikes, black and white flag. They need to explain that to the fans so the fans understand. Secondly, if all these drivers are getting penalties, and I totally agree with you, they're drivers that should keep in the white line, they have to look at the nature of the track and see why is it so difficult for them to stay in. And again, agree with you that it should, you know, where the white lines are, right? I know it's a little bit difficult in the cars with the bigger tires and stuff like that. But then I think one of the unique things about Austria is obviously where they were going off is very high speed.
Yeah.
But they can't put in gravel traps or certain things because it's also used as for motorbike racing.
Yeah,
they can't put a gravel trap there. So that's where the big, intelligent people, I say big brain people at the FIA need to work on a solution that's like put something there that works for both types of vehicles. But I think the main thing they need to come out is explain, this is how we detect track limits. This is how long it takes us to hand out a penalty. And this is why 1,200 things came up. And this is why we didn't do all of them.
To be fair, they did explain. They did explain.
Yeah, but afterwards, right?
Yes, way too late. Yeah,
way too late, right?
They could have easily come out after Friday quali, where they had, like, I think it was like 56 lap times were deleted or something around that, something ridiculous. Lap times were deleted because of track limit violations, and it's like, maybe on Friday you should have come out and explained to the fans exactly what was going on, and then maybe even prepared yourself for Sunday, or prepared yourself even better. Because there are millions of data points and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's a way of calculating it.
Yeah, no. I think, part of the problem I think the sport has, and this is really annoying, which I think, which should have been solved with Netflix, is the lack of clarification, rule enforcement stuff that the FIA do and how the stewards work that the fans don't understand, and it causes a lot of frustration. It's like, why are you giving this penalty? Why is it taking you so long? If they understood the why, all right, I understand you've got to look at a load of camera angles, and that takes a little bit of time, and maybe one of the stewards is giving you this point of view, another steward is giving that point of view, because all you see in the post-race PDF that they put out is like, the stewards discussed car number 44 was at fault because of X. It's like, but how did you get to that decision? And then when fans start to kind of understand that, then they're like, oh, it's taken so long because of this or because of that. Or they've said that we understand it's taken so long, which they did come out and say afterwards, we're going to work on it by seeing what we can do with the track and see what we can do with our system. They just don't have that clarity, which we see in other sports, right? If you look at football, why did the referee make that decision? Why did he overturn this? Why did he not look at VAR?
Yeah.
And it just causes fans frustration.
Yeah.
And they would be so much more empathetic with stewards, with the FIA, with every sporting referee who said, this is why we did it. This is what we saw.
Yeah.
I can kind of understand it. I might disagree, but I can kind of understand it.
Yeah, there's more reasoning given.
Yeah. And I think maybe this can segue because we're talking about tracks.
Sure.
And changes that need to be made.
Mm.
Was the sad death of, I've got it up here because I don't want to say his name wrong, Dilo Van Toff?
Delano Van
Toff.
Delano. We'll go with Delano. I'm 99% sure. Van
Apologies
Toff.
if we're saying it incorrectly. Who sadly lost his life at Spa. I don't know. There's enough information that hasn't been given out yet, but a lot of it seems to be down to the nature of Eau Rouge, the circuit itself, especially that corner.
Yeah.
I think it was a last lap kind of similar to Abu Dhabi 2021. Was like, we're just going to go racing on the last lap, and perhaps they should have ended it under safety car conditions.
Yeah, I 95% blame the stewards with this one. To be completely honest, I think that the stewards are at fault for his unfortunate accident and obviously death. I think it's horrific. Yeah. It is absolutely horrific. But for those of you who don't know, the conditions were awful. Like, they were absolutely awful. If you remember last year to when Lando binned it at Eau Rouge in the wet, and Vettel followed up and like checked Lando was okay, and he was like, "It's red flag, red flag."
2021.
Sorry, was it 21? I do apologize.
Yeah, because he was in the bigger cars. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and first of all, thankfully, we have so many safety features on Formula One cars now where, like, obviously accidents are reduced and lives are saved. I mean, look at Joe at the British Grand Prix last year. Like, if that was 20 years ago, he's gone. Like, without the halo, he's gone. That's it.
But
let me
just stop you there, because you mentioned something, which was the track, right? So let's put the stewards aside.
Yeah.
You've got Lando had his incident there. I think K-Mag's had a really bad crash there.
Yeah, Fernando saved an accident there because Fernando Alonso has ridiculous car control. He almost had an accident, I believe, during the same race that Kevin binned it there as well.
Yeah. Antoine Hubert sadly lost his life there. Do you think that changes, stewarding aside the fact that it was wet and they shouldn't have gone racing, do you think changes need to be made to Spa to prevent this happening again?
Yes and no. So bear with me on this one, because I fully understand that I am talking about a very sensitive topic where lives have been lost, and I am in no way an expert, so please do bear that in mind. But for me, I think that typically these accidents happen more in the wet rather than the dry. So and this is why I said that the stewards, I believe, are mostly at fault, because the conditions, you shouldn't have been racing in those conditions. That's it. Like, end of. You should not have been racing in those conditions. However, had the safety features at the track been slightly altered or whatever it is, then obviously you probably wouldn't have had such a serious accident or whatever. I think that the runoffs potentially need to change, because I think that the runoff just before you go down that massive straight is not that big. It really isn't that big. And I think that it's just, there's a wall of tyres, and then there's the catch fence, essentially. And I almost feel like the tyres should be twice as high, almost, for a start. I'm not saying that, drivers are literally flying over the fence type thing. But I think that the tyres should be twice as high. But also, there's no reason as to why they couldn't push that tyre barrier 10-15 meters further into the forest and have a much smoother transition from the corner to the straight, almost having almost like a big runoff area like you have in turn 1 in Russia, like that bigger area, or even turn 1 in Austria. There's that massive area that there's a runoff into. I don't think gravel would help there, to be completely honest. And please, for the love of God, do not put sausage curbs there, because sausage curbs, I would argue, are more dangerous than they are helpful. So I think that there's definitely stuff that they could do to make that track safer, or that corner specifically, because let's be honest, the rest of the track at the moment isn't that dangerous. It's that one corner which is essentially a widowmaker at this point, which is horrible. And yeah, what do you think? Because I mean, I think it was 99%, 95% at fault of the stewards for me on this one.
Honestly, I don't know. Because it's a sensitive subject, they've not released a lot of information. I don't want to make
Unfortunately,
assumptions.
there was a clip that made it around
I've
of
not
the
seen
actual
the clip.
crash,
I don't
and I
like to see
specifically
things
avoided it because I don't want to see that. I don't.
I don't like to see things like that. I think it goes back to what we were saying before: is the stewards need to explain why.
Yeah.
Right. So at the moment, you're putting the fault on the stewards, but you don't know why. You're only looking at it from an external perspective. I'm not saying the stewards are right and wrong.
Yeah.
This is why we decided to go racing.
Yeah.
This is what we saw. We felt it was safe because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, now, I mean, it's sad that it took maybe it's taken a loss of life for them to say, actually, we shouldn't have done that, and we're not going to do that, and these are our new procedures. So I'd like the stewards, I'd like there to be a report to come out, say why we made every decision, and the stewards need to, or whoever it was, race director, need to explain that. But I think also what you say, that corner does need to be redesigned. I know there's a romanticism about Spa and Eau Rouge and the Camel Straight, and it's a great track. It's my favorite circuit of the entire season. But I would absolutely agree with you in like we need to make changes to that corner, whether to slow it down, whether to give more space, like I said, push it back.
Yeah.
Even if it changes the track, because one incident is one too many.
Yeah.
Well, one death is one too many.
But we've had two in the past 5 years.
Yeah, and you look at what happened to Lando, you look at what happened to K-Mag and the other, really close calls. I think Sergio, again, he saved it up there, and Fernando as well. It's just, if you don't do anything, it's going to happen again. And with Antoine, they didn't do anything really, and it's happened again.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, no, I'm not saying was it Formula Alpine he was racing in?
Yeah,
for the regional. Just because they're slower doesn't make them no less dangerous than Formula One cars. Imagine if it's a Formula One car.
I actually, in complete honesty, because of the safety features that are part of Formula One, I would rather crash in a Formula One car there than a Formula 2 or Formula 3 because those cars are so much bigger and so much safer. Now that leads into, do we not think that the safety features that are coming from Formula 1 and Formula 1 need to make their way into these regional Formula cars and stuff like that? Because I think they do.
Because obviously they all adopted the Halo.
Maybe they need to do more. Maybe these cars need to be bigger or whatever it is. But again, that doesn't really equate to the corner itself, because I think clearly the corner is the issue, because you've still got Formula 1 cars crashing there. And let's say that Lando had gone off during the race and Vettel had followed him in and driven into him, then we would still be talking about that incident rather than, and it was during racing incidents. And I have read up like exactly what happened with Delano, and it was just he span off and another car crashed into him, unfortunately. Just to confirm what it was, because I wasn't entirely sure, because I had been like avoiding some of the details because you just don't want to know. It's horrific,
especially after Antoine. And I know the clip gets memed quite a lot, but in the W series you saw the cars go off there.
Oh yeah, like 5 cars go off. But that was on the opposite side. So still, as you're coming up the hill, so it goes left and then swings right at the top of the hill and then goes left again just before you go towards the straight. So the W series was at that first left. They went straight off there. He's gone left and then gone right and then lost it, apparently, by the looks of things, and then another car has driven into him. So it's a slightly different incident, but I still believe that looking at that corner, you can make those runoff areas a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah. And I think this is now the time for the FIA race organizers to like take action.
Yeah.
If they do nothing, I think that's quite pathetic, really.
I think that, in all honesty, if you are the FIA and you're looking at this incident right now and the fact that there was another incident a few years ago, we're looking now into like Great Britain, and then we have Hungary, and then we have Belgium. if the FIA turn around and said within the next week we are not racing at Belgium until these safety issues are addressed, I'd fully support that.
I would support that.
Like honestly, if they said, right, what we're going to do is we're going to do a double header at because obviously we're in Hungary the week before. They speak to the Hungarian organisers and they go, we're going to do a double race at Hungary,
or they just cancel it,
or they cancel the race, or maybe I don't know, maybe they can find Turkey on a really short whim. But if they cancelled or replaced the race, I would fully support that, because I just don't think that. I don't think that in this day and age, when we have so much data, we have so many things that we can do to make racing safer, that you can logically carry on racing at this event with the track layout in the way that it is, personally.
Yeah, and all forms of motorsport, there's always going to be danger, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I understand it's dangerous.
You can't plan for you can't plan for everything, and that's sort of the allure of the sport, right?
Yeah.
That they're driving these cars at 200 miles per hour.
Yeah. That's also part of the draw of Spa, is the fact that you know that it is the one of the most dangerous tracks in the world.
But respect to every driver that gets into a car, it could be the last time. And Formula One and the FIA have made serious strides over the past few years.
Yeah,
but they can't stop. If there's a way to make it safer, absolutely do it.
Something needs to be done, because it just isn't good enough.
Yeah, and it's multiple times. If it was once, maybe you could say it was a host of things and we're going to make changes, but it's not. It's twice, and that's twice too many.
What if they were to, in France, they have the like on the runoff areas, they're massive, but they have these stripes which slow the cars down massively. What if they were to have something like that on either side of Eau Rouge? So at the very least, you slow that car down a little bit as it comes off. That would be a good idea.
Whatever they put in, as long as like you said, it can't be gravel, because if that car gets beached or flipped,
it can't be gravel
at that speed. But they need to do something.
Yeah, I think that those high traction stripes could be a step in the right direction. Literally fill the whole runoff area with those stripes, because all they're going to do is ruin tires. They are not going to make it any worse. Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, sad news, unfortunately, that overshadowed the weekend, and yeah, it's just not nice. It just isn't. There's no other way of putting it. It is horrific. Hopefully we'll see some changes coming soon that prevents that happening in the future.
Yeah, let's hope so. I'm just looking at it on a satellite image, and you can very clearly see that there's so much room for them to have a bigger runoff area. Like, there is so much room that it just doesn't make any sense. Even if you just push the tire barrier back like 5 meters, that could make all the difference. And you can there's a big strip of tarmac there. Just put those slow down lines on it. Yeah. Like just to slow down the cars. I think even if you just to do that, like it would help massively. But again, I am in no way an expert. You are in no way an expert. But like there is a reason why we don't race at the Nürburgring. Is because it is too dangerous. Could Spa be one of those tracks where we just say it's too dangerous?
Could be. Like, look, I'd be sad to lose Spa, but I would lose it if it meant we didn't lose any lives.
Yeah. Absolutely. So. But it will be interesting to see what they do. But again, thoughts are with the Van 't Hoff's family. Again, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, and I do apologize. It's horrific. But we cannot end this podcast episode on such a downer note, because that's not nice whatsoever. But we won't talk about British Grand Prix. That will come in the next episode. But we can talk about some of the upgrades that came to the cars this weekend, both with Ferrari and McLaren receiving some upgrades and Mercedes receiving a couple as well. So in terms of those upgrades, you can very clearly see that the McLaren ones are working pretty well, or at the very least comparatively. They're working
Yeah,
pretty well
I think
compared from
we'll
Piastri
get
to Lando.
we'll get a more accurate picture when Piastri gets the upgrades in
Exactly. Yeah.
Silverstone to see how well they're working, and hopefully he'll be up there with Lando.
Yeah.
Is he getting? So are they both getting the 75%?
I
Right?
believe they're both getting the 75%.
It's not going to be like he'll get 50, like Oscar will get 50, like he'll get the Austria upgrades, and Lando will have Austria plus Silverstone.
I'm not
Are they
exactly
both going to be on
sure.
equal footing? I'm hoping they're both
I
on equal
think
footing.
equal footing, but
They've got to, just so they can compare data.
I actually think that the thing that makes sense would actually be to tweak the 50% upgrades that were on Lando's car, tweak those based on data from Austria, and put those on Piastri's car to see whether or not there are any gains that they can make out of that. Then you also upgrade Lando's car with the 75% package to see whether or not that affects the rest of the 50% upgrade package as well, so that you have lots and lots of data to compare. Like, let's say, for example, they upgrade the front wing on Lando's car, but don't upgrade it on Piastri's. They maybe find out that the old wing actually affects the rear diffuser more than the floor, compared to Lando's upgraded front wing, which affects the floor more and doesn't affect the rear diffuser, or whatever it is. I don't know, but maybe they actually keep them different purely so that they have different data points. I don't know. I can try and find out and see what the plan is.
Yeah, so they've got it, and obviously Ferrari, their upgrades seem to be doing well and bringing some more balance and performance to the car. Hopefully they'll continue to build on that. And I guess the question now is, because who do you think will win the first non-Red Bull race?
I don't know.
Because a lot of people are saying Aston, and I think Aston may have a chance at Singapore. But with Mercedes' upgrades, seeing how they do at Silverstone, Ferrari's coming up. We'll put McLaren in there.
I can see Ferrari doing it.
I think Ferrari would do it.
But I've said this multiple times. I think that the first non-Red Bull win will be in Hungary. I think it will be somebody who hasn't won before.
Oh, okay. So you're going for another Esteban Ocon
I'm
situation.
saying like another Esteban Ocon situation. So it could be, honestly, this is an outside chance. It could be Hulk. You never know, because the Hungary always flips things on its head, and there's always some sort of surprise winner in Hungary.
It does when it's mixed conditions.
Yeah, exactly. But
I think it's going to be Charles. I think Charles will pull a win out somewhere.
I hope that Charles managed to get a win this season. Or at the very least, maybe even I'd take a Sainz win as well. But I think that if Max were to win every single race this season, well, he hasn't obviously, but Sergio has. But like, I think if Red Bull were to win every single race this season, like, it is a bit boring.
It is
because then next season they'd probably end up doing it almost the exact same again. It's just like, oh god, we're going into this domination.
Because as much as we love battles throughout the field, it is the fight for the podiums. The P1 is really what gets you excited.
Yeah.
And Red Bull and Max have done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
They built the best car. He's the best driver.
Lewis whining was very annoying. I'll be completely honest. Lewis Hamilton saying, oh, maybe you should only be able to develop next year's car as of the summer break. Man, shut up. Shut up. Because for 15 million years while you were dominating, you didn't say shit. So please stop whining, you whiny little baby. Is the entire thought of my especially when he was on the radio saying, "Oh, this car sucks. Oh, it's undrivable, man." Shut up and drive the fucking car. Stop. Don't get me wrong. I have the utmost respect for Lewis, but stop whining like a child, please. Because George isn't whining.
I think George is happy.
Talk about that. Talk about the fact that George is more than happy to be not driving a Williams.
But I think that's the difference, right? When you come from a winning car to a non-winning car, that's how your mind works.
True.
It's kind of like, I know what we're capable of, and maybe that's a frustration.
Yeah,
whereas
true.
George has went from non-winning to he's won the race in there.
True.
So,
but you can see my point, right? Is the fact that you weren't saying it when you had to turn the engines down after 3 races because you and Nico were 8 miles ahead of everyone else. Like, you weren't saying it then, so you're only saying it now because you're being a bit of a sore loser, in all honesty. Yeah, whatever. Just honestly, Hamilton, just leave it alone. Again, I love you, but just shush. Just to go back slightly, McLaren are facing a similar spec split between its two cars heading into the British Grand Prix. It is still targeting at having 75% of the upgrade on both cars. So there you go. So the target is to have Lando and Oscar on the same amount of upgrades. But
just
it could
just
change.
before we end this podcast, because we'll talk about Silverstone. Silverstone's going to be really interesting because you're going.
Yes,
So,
I will be there.
Yeah, it'll be good to hear your experience post Silverstone. Can we just talk about the meme with the
Meme?
Was it the Iron Man guy who was floating through the Austria circuit and he crashed, and Oscar was like,
oh my god, it just was the funniest thing in the world, because you can tell Oscar just wanted to laugh. You can tell.
Yeah, like, the camera's on me.
He was like, you can tell he was sat there. He was like, oh no, it's the TV's cut to me. Oh no,
I hope he's okay.
Man, it was just so fun. It's so funny.
Yeah.
It just was you can't write this stuff.
That director's like, okay, now cut to Oscar.
Yeah,
I guess part of it was like, we
need to cut away from something, and then I think it was just pure chance that they cut to a different camera of Oscar sat there watching the TV, and then he can see himself on the TV. It's so good. It is so good.
That image, that little video, that's a meme now. You can have anything, any little clip, Formula One or non-Formula One related, and then just cut to Oscar.
Yeah, just cut to Oscar going, oh no.
It's like the Monaco Lance Stroll meme now.
Yeah. It's absolutely unreal. And speaking of memes as well, we had a pretty good run on the Instagram and TikTok channels. So
more will be coming.
If for some reason you are one of the new listeners, or you decided to pick up the podcast, welcome, and also congrats for making it an hour and 1 minute and 38 seconds into a podcast talking about this race. So welcome. Trust me, we've got a lot more shit posting coming your way, and a lot more completely ridiculous opinions and bits and pieces to come.
Actually, do we want to talk about certain team's new livery, or should we save that for the preview?
We're saving that for next week, mate.
Okay.
We are saving that for next week. Well, I guess next episode.
Because it was released now.
No. Next episode. It is coming next episode. So thank you very much for listening, because we've been running for an hour and 2 minutes now. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back later on in the week, Friday, where we will release the episode talking all about the Silverstone Grand Prix. Like I said, I'll be there. I'll be covering some bits and pieces. So there might be some different content coming. And also that means that next week's episodes may be a little bit delayed, depending on my travel around the UK / Denmark, where I'm based. So yeah, do bear with us. But if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe to the podcast if you're watching it on YouTube, listening on Spotify, or streaming it on Apple Podcasts or your other preferred platform. Be sure to follow us, because we've had a little bit of an influx, so join the club. Why not? And be sure to leave us a rating.
Stay within the track limits.
Stay within the bloody track limits, Ocon. Esty the worsty, honestly. Learn to drive a car. Shut up. Right, see you later.
So mean.
Honestly, learn to drive a car. Like, take his license away. Super license points on him.